one in the car. At this time, I'll call the regular meeting of the Wallingford Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Commission to order. The date is February 5th, 2025, and the time is 7 p.m. Please join me in a pledge of allegiance to the flag. I'm on. How many? Are we on? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, start with a roll call.
Caroline Reyes.
Eileen McKean.
Nick Byrne.
Jim Vitale.
Deborah Phillips.
Michael Caruso.
Jim Heilman.
Aaron O'Hare, environmental planner.
Okay, now, Aaron, is the conversation we had earlier, the minutes for the regular meeting of December 4th still need to be worked on?
Yes, I think it'd be easier if we just table them for the moment until next
Okay, so
month.
we're going to table the minutes from December 4th. But the minutes from the special meeting of December 7th should be okay, correct?
I handed them out tonight, and
There's one correction. I'm listed as attending the meeting and I was absent.
I apologize.
Wait a minute, I'm missing something here. Okay. What's the story with the minutes from the special meeting?
I made a mistake. I wrote them, not Kathy. I wrote them, and I made a mistake. I thought Debbie was there. Sorry,
Okay, are
I
you correcting them,
apologize.
Debbie?
Yes, I'm correcting them.
Okay, correct the minutes then.
To remove Deb Phillips from the roll call, I should be listed as absent for the meeting.
Okay, is that it? Deb Phillips was not at the site investigation, even though she's on the roll call.
Right, I think I was there.
So it's the other way around. You were there. You weren't absent. Deb Phillips was.
Yeah,
All right.
I think I was there.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes with corrections?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the minutes from the special meeting on December 7th, 2024 be approved with the corrections of Deb Phillips being removed from the, as present, and Isla McKean as listed as present instead.
Second? Second. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Should call for a vote. Let's see, we got full slate, so we got Nick,
Yes.
Debbie,
Abstain.
Mike? Yes. Jeff is not there. Okay, Ally, you,
I'll vote yes on this because I was there.
what's that?
I'll vote yes on this because I
Yes.
was there.
Yep.
But typically when there's a Republican absent, then the Republican alternate takes place. so-
Right.
Okay.
Right, and that, you're not the Republican alternate, are you?
No.
Okay. Jim Heilman, you're going to be the voting member tonight, okay, for the Republicans. Okay, and I vote yes on the amended minutes, okay, on the special meeting. Let it be known that there was no minutes for the regular meeting of January 8th. There was no meeting. All right, now, we've got a couple of big items on the agenda, which is the public hearing. But going down into old business, I want to go through old business quickly and get that taken care of. So start on item 1A 19 3.7 988 East Center Street bond release. Are they ready?
No, they want to
No.
pick it up in the spring
Okay,
when we
no.
can do plantings.
So number 2A 24 12.1 12 Chimney Hill Road, Chimney Sweep Road, This was an addition. It was granted administratively. Aaron and I discussed it, and it was granted administratively. Item 4, A24 12.3, East Center Street, Wallingford Water Division. This, Aaron and I also discussed this, and we saw no reason not to give it administration approval. So the only on the old business agenda is A24 12.2, 219 Church Street, Yalesville, and 227 Church Street, Yalesville. Anybody here representing them? Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Make sure your mic is on. The button, there's a green button right in the center. And name for the record,
Keith Goldberg.
representing United Concrete Products, is that what it
Yes.
is? Okay, you have submitted a plan to discuss the use of this property for concrete storage.
That's correct.
Right. So you've submitted a map, and this is the plan you want to submit.
That is correct, sir.
And you've been in discussion, or your boss has been in discussion with Aaron, and they don't see eye to eye on every item, but this is what you're applying for.
That is correct.
Is there anything you want to tell us about this?
Based on all the communications back and forth over the last many days, I think that
Make
this
sure you
map,
speak in the mic. I think you're a little
I
soft
apologize.
on that.
Based on all the communications over the last few days and from last week, I think that this map that sits in front of you addresses all of the concerns and issues that were put forth.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions? Deb? Mike?
No question.
Jimmy? No. All I can say is I go back to this property back into the 50s, and with the removal of the house and the barn and a few other things, I mean, the driveway was paved, that's right up to where it was. Everything is pretty much the same. Aaron's got a few comments, but I think there's an overreaction to the site.
There's been a lot of activity on this application. As you remember, Mr. Gavin was here at the December 4th meeting. He had submitted that day, an application that day, so it was a day late to get it received that day. So it would have been received January 8th. That meeting was canceled, so here we are. So it was received technically January 8th, so tonight is the presentation, the official presentation of the application. He's out of town, so Keith is here representing him. A lot of internal back and forth on this between the different departments. I'll boil it down. I went out there in November, they were grading. I knew nothing about it. Turns out Mr. Gavin had gone and gotten a demolition permit, as he should have, in July to take down the two houses, all the outbuildings, all the stuff that was stored on the property, the sewer connections, electric, all that. What he wasn't told at that time, he needed a wetland permit.
You know, Aaron, we went through this already.
Okay.
Let's get down to what the site is. We have a public hearing tonight to deal with.
So, yesterday I got a map of the sewer. So there's a sewer line running near the river, which in this case, he's not going down vertically. So the sewer department we got yesterday, they're okay with it. If he was going down vertically, that'd be a different story, but they're okay with it. All right, so like you said, Mr. Chairman, this is the latest. It came in yesterday, the latest plan, which really shows everything we were looking for. The whole design of the milling, the storage yard millings, he's going to have millings on the storage yard, was predicated by the floodway line. Now, anyone could go on the internet and look up where it is, but Mr. Gavin, what the town requires is for Mr. Gavin to get an engineer to put it on the plan, not just looking at it on a screen, of course. So this is based on the elevation. And the floodway line is a little hard to see, but it's the first line you see, the first curved line up at this map. That's the floodway line. He was also asked to put the floodplain line on. Two-thirds of this property is in the floodplain, 100-year floodplain. The reason the flood manager, who in this town is the same as the town planner, Kevin Pacini, the reason he's not concerned or making them do compensatory flood storage is because Mr. Gavin has demonstrated that what was there today and what he's putting in is actually, I think he said at the last count, 700 square foot reduction, or 900 now?
It's 914, ma'am.
Okay, so that's why he doesn't have to do compensatory flood storage under the flood permits of the flood zoning of this town. But he does, as everybody does, has to keep out of the floodway. Nothing's allowed in the floodway. So that's why the design, the edge, the western edge of this storage yard is the floodway line, that he's not going anywhere beyond that. So what Mr. Gavin has done is put on here the little arrows, the little red arrows all the way along, because I asked him to, so the distance back from the water, how far back, because it's not a straight line, it bows. So it goes from the closest, 15, to then it goes up to like 35, 40 on the north end. And why? Why is it so different? Because down at the south end, it's a straight bank. Up at the north end, it's a relaxed bank. And you could see that in the pictures that I attached to my environmental planners report that went out Friday. I have 3 pictures, south, middle, and the north is relaxed slope. And then down at the south, it's steep, and that's where it's getting the closest. Now, a little wrinkle was that the town engineer wanted him to put in erosion controls. So now, I don't know if Keith knows this, but the erosion controls are planned tonight to go 4 feet back from the edge of the Jersey barriers. I don't know if they have to, maybe they can be a little closer, because that brings us 4 feet even closer to the river. This doesn't come in under our section surfaced area because, again, he netted out on the surface area. There was so much surface area there before he renovated the site, that nets out. He's not coming in under that. He's only coming in under stuff within 50 feet of the river. So that's what you're asked to approve, any activity within 50 feet of the river, which would be the millings, the Jersey barriers, silt fence.
But your map doesn't show 50 feet from the river, correct?
This,
That soil, now, what I heard before about this stormwater management control that was brought up by the town engineer, you were aware of that?
I don't want to misspeak.
Well, as I recall, this commission gave instructions to Gavin to go to the town planner because it was floodplain. And what did he require? Now, there's nothing here that requires anything.
Because the way I understood it, sir, he was fine.
And there's nothing pro, nothing con, so I assume he was accepting your plan. What I heard for a stone trench to handle stormwater, I'm not in agreement with, because it was a 3 feet by 4 feet stone trench on the top of the lip, and I felt that if you filled that with water, you weakened that top lip of the bank. They were cutting it to. Now, we can talk about all the steep slope and everything else, but there's no evidence of an erosion on that bank. That bank has been stable, and it is. And now, the bank is staying as it is?
That's correct.
And the tree line is staying as it is?
That is correct. And we plan on putting the Jersey barriers, and the Jersey barriers are going to be labeled with signage. So that we're not going to move the barriers. They're going to be permanent.
Wow. I think you better rethink your Jersey barrier program. I haven't seen what it's supposed to look like, but it's not a continuous run of Jersey barriers.
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir. There's gaps in between, as you see in this plan.
Yeah.
But we want to make sure we label them.
All right. Well, I'm in favor of the plan. Basically, it's got the existing tree line. It's got the driveway that's been there since the 50s or before. I'm in favor of the plan. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels. Jimmy?
2 things I think the commission always focuses on is the environment, the wetland environment, and also public safety. In terms of the environment here, nothing really much is changing. The floodplain remains the same. I have no real objection to the material being used. I don't know if it's the wisest thing to be using, but it's part of our infrastructure. It's remnants from that. And although it's probably not the best thing in the world, it certainly isn't the worst thing in the world. In terms of erosion in the future, no one knows what's going to happen in this area. But no one's going to be hurt either by what is proposed in this area. There's no safety issue. If there was a major flood in the area, and eventually someday there will be, there's nothing that's going to be floating away. In fact, it'll be a point of stability more than anything else. I tend to agree with the chairman on this. I don't see anything destructive to the existing environment, and I don't see any potential danger to the public with what is being proposed here. So I tend to agree with what proposed.
Any other comments, Mike?
I'm fine with it.
Deb?
Fine.
Nick? Ally?
All set.
Caroline?
Just that I can appreciate that the tree line is staying the same. Thank you.
Well, then I'll entertain a motion to determine significant activity.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that application A24-12.2, 219 Church Street and 227 Church Street be deemed not a significant impact activity.
Is there a second? Second. Motion made and second. I'll call for a vote. Nick?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Mike? Yes. Jim?
Yes.
Yes. Then I'll entertain a motion to approve or deny this application.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that application A24-12.2, 219 Church Street and 227 Church Street be approved.
Second? Second. Any discussion? Call for a
Do
vote.
you,
Nick?
Yes.
do you want to add the placards?
Call for a second. The second's called. Call for a vote. You can give them the placards. They'll put up placards up anytime. Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Jimmy? I'm sorry. Yes. I'm sure Aaron put up that we'll offer you placards to put along that edge.
No issue.
No problem. Nope. Okay, super.
Chair Vitale, your vote was yes?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.
Very good. That, now we'll get into the public hearing of tonight. Tonight, we're going to have a public hearing because of public interest on application A24-10.3. This consists of multiple properties along Barnes Road and Northrop Road, Midwood Management, industrial development.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. For the record, James Perito from Halloran Sage, representing the applicant. Second. So we're here on behalf of Midwood Management Corporation for Inland Wetlands application A24-10.3. The property is 1,010, 1020, 1030, 1044, and 1080 Barnes Road. We also have included 777 Norfolk Road, since we have a road easement which will be having some upgrades. With me are the owner's representatives. They're sitting just in the row behind me. Lauren Sanders, who's the project executive, Chris Feza, the assistant project executive, and Kevin Cornell, who's been before you on several developments in this area. Our engineering group, OCC Design Consortium, is here tonight, George Cotter. As you know, Dave Carson was here at the initial meeting, but has recently had some medical issues which prevents him from attending tonight. But George and Dave have been very closely on this project. Our environmental and wetlands experts, George Logan from Riva Environmental Services, is here as well, who will give his report.
Ms. Attorney Perito, can we just do the extension part first?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get into the a couple things of house cleaning. So I'll do with that as well.
Just
So
make this a wetland presentation, not a planning and zoning
no,
presentation.
understood. There's a couple things that, from a house cleaning standpoint, If you remember, at the December 2024 meeting, you determined this project did not involve significant impact activity, and a public hearing was scheduled, however, to allow for public input. Originally, it was scheduled for January 8th and postponed to tonight. I submitted an email to the environmental planner, which granted the extension to the Wetlands Commission to commence the public hearing tonight, because you needed that to, because of the time frame that were involved. I'll also, when they're presenting, I'll give to the environmental planner the proof of notice to the abutters that was required under regulations, because we've done all that. So, just going to give a quick brief overview, and then George will get into the specifics. The site is 47.7 acres in total. The total wetland area on site is about 10 acres, and the area of the wetland to be altered is approximately 0.087, which is about 3,778 square feet, most of which is to upgrade the existing stream crossings that were previously there and to perform maintenance on the previously approved stormwater structures that you all approved for other projects. The overall proposed plan is to develop 3 industrial warehousing storage buildings. The design has been phased into 3 distinct projects so as to minimize the disturbance and to ensure that the sedimentation and erosion control measures will be effective. Each phase can stand alone in terms of its development and stormwater controls. As noted by Mr. Logan in his report, there is no anticipated impact on the wetlands or watercourses, and especially the neighboring North Farms Reservoir, which he'll get into. The environmental planner gave us 2 memos since your last meeting, January 10th and January 17th, and then photos from several site visits, all of which you should have in your packets. Our team submitted updated and revised site plans and drawings on January 31st, as well as a comprehensive reply in the format requested by Erin to her comments, as well as some of the engineering comments. We submitted an updated stormwater management plan and an updated supplemental wetlands assessment. So I think as we go through this, you'll see we've addressed all the comments to date. And at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Cotter.
Wait, hang on a minute. Before you do that, in your opening paragraph, I don't think I heard you correctly. You indicated in the December meeting, you talked about significant activity. We talked about a public hearing, but not for significant activity.
Correct.
You didn't say that we determined this was not a significant activity.
I believe you did.
I don't know if we voted on that. Did we vote on that?
Yes.
I think you
Yes.
did, Mr. Chair.
Correct.
Yes,
I
you did.
stand corrected.
Because at that meeting, you said, well, there might be public interest, so we should probably sit down a public hearing, which is what
Based on public
this was set
interest.
up.
That I
But you
understand.
made that determination of no significant
Fortunately, I
impact.
didn't recall if we determined actually significant activity. Yes, Mr. Cotter.
Mr. Cotter.
George Cotter from the OCC Group. I'd like to hand in a couple of things as they start. Tonight, some photographs and a revision of one sheet where a temporary basin was mislabeled, and the confusion with Dave being out, just to put it on the record as being correct.
Well, you can hand it in.
Do you have copies for everybody? Do you have 8 copies? 1 copy of, and how many? 1 of these? You got 8 of these? This
Just to go over what I've submitted, just to show the commission, the photographs, the first photograph shows a portion of the stormwater basin that was approved in 1996 for the original application off Barnes Road, which is now the site of Building 2. When I get to the board, it's significant overgrowth, and what we need to do is restore the basin, clear the overgrowth in that area, both inside the basin and outside. The second photo shows the area below the basin towards the North Farm Reservoir. There is a swale that was constructed there at the time of the installation of the basin. And as you can see in the photo, there is a filter fabric down. This area provides a level spreader for the flows out of this basin. And in my presentation, I'll indicate that there's not the need for riprap from the wetland area from where this swale is down to North Farms Reservoir. The third photo is the existing level spreader when we did our site walk. As you can see in the trench for the level spreader, in our original photos, there is the filter fabric that is in there. You can see that there's growth in the swale, and also on either side, there's growth. And in our plans, we'll call for all of the vegetation area in the swale to be removed, and 6 feet either side for activity so you can maintain the swale as intended. And the final photo is just the outfall of the 36-inch culvert that was placed to get to building 3. That was installed back in the 96 when we had our original permit for the building on Barnes Road. We will extend that culvert out 8 feet, and we will put riprap, appropriate riprap, in front of that culvert. At this time, I'd like to go to the board if I could.
Take the microphone with you. George, how about bringing that easel forward a little bit? There you go. Is that okay, Jim?
This is a plan. It's an existing condition plan showing the parcels for the property. The bottom of the map is Barnes Road. To the right and the east is Northrop Road. To the north is Walls Farm, and to the west is North Farms Reservoir. The area shaded in green is the present wetlands on the site. Roughly 8-acre corridor from Walls property down through the center, crossing the culvert that we installed as part of that permit in 96 to access the rear portion where building 3 will go, and the wetlands down to the reservoir. And then you have the wetlands along the reservoir all the way to the north edge of the property, and one small isolated wetland that Mr. Logan identified on the property. All of this will stay as is. We have very minimal activities within the upland review area that's shown around the edge of the wetlands, and also around the basin here that was part of the 777 Northrop Road approval. As you can see here, this is where we, at time, we got the approval for 777, that we wanted to extend the road to the rear portion of the property. This is an existing, what I would call a farm road. This space here, as you see, is not wetlands. The wetland buffer ends at the south side of the road and on the north side of the farm road. The culvert that was in there was at some point taken out. We will install a new culvert, which is in the details on the plan. But as you can see, that is non-wetland soil for which we will do a small amount of filling on either side in order to get the road through. This map identifies the soils on the property that is shown in Mr. Logan's report. We have the wetland soils, which are a Wilbraham for the area and corridor that runs from the north down towards the south and into North Farms Reservoir. And we've got a silt loam that runs along the edge of the North Farms Reservoir. The soils upland are consistent of Cheshire fine sandy loams, which is the 63 areas, which encompass a good portion of this area, and also in the area of Building 1. Both the Cheshire and the Yalesville soils that are shown on the property are fine sandy loams, not silt loams, and has a high content of a sand type soil in that. It's very permeable, and it's not the kind of soils that we have had further out in the watershed adjacent to Research Parkway. This is the overall plan for the site. The areas in green are the areas that will remain wooded, undisturbed. And as you can see on the north edge of the property, we've got approximately 300 feet of the wooded upland areas, with the small wetland that is located in this vicinity, right where my finger is. Down through the center part of it is an open grassed area on either side of the access road, and along either side are a wooded corridor. You can see the buffer area adjacent that we will maintain. For site number 2, we had a previously approval to fill right to the wetland line, either with our grading or parking for the approved building. We have moved everything back so that we are maintaining the 50-foot buffer around Building 2. Building 1, again, maintaining the buffer except for a very small piece here, and I will, the next sheet I will describe each site as to either a filling or an upland area incursion. This is our sheet, WP1, where we show all the activities. And again, they're basically associated with creating the access way to Phase 3 over the existing farm road, which a majority of it is non-wetlands. The only wetland disturbance is the area shown in red, which is about 4,000 square feet. We put one-to-one slopes on the side of the fill for the crossing through through that area, and riprap on those slopes to stabilize. Those are shown in the drawings.
Okay, George, what kind of culvert you using there?
I believe it's an 18-inch culvert.
Just a round
Yep.
concrete?
Yep.
Okay, I want to take, anybody got any questions? We're going to do activity by activity.
All right.
Commissioners, any questions regarding that crossing, Caroline?
Yes, you said 4,000 square feet disturbed. Is that, can you just explain to me what you mean by disturbance? Is that the building of the road or?
If you can, you're pretty far away. There's a red line here that's probably 6 or 8 feet wide. It's, on this side, it's probably 225 feet long. This side, it's maybe 200. That is the area in red is the actual wetlands we need to fill for the shoulders of the road that is outside the area in the center, which is non-wetlands. So you have a wetland line on the south side and you have a wetland line on the north side, and you have non-wetland soils in the middle where we're building the road. The red area is the actual area of wetlands that is disturbed. So it's a 6 to 8 foot wide
Nick?
strip.
Better? Debbie? Mike?
No questions.
Jimmy?
You've mentioned, am I on there? Yes, you've mentioned the area where that farm road goes through there, referring to it as not wetlands. True. The reason it's not wetlands, though, has never been mentioned. It cuts right through a wetland, so that's where the farmers
Well,
build that area. Look at the contours, the shape, and everything.
I agree with you, but there was a residence, I'm not, well, I'll restate that. There was a structure down here
Yeah,
that a
there's
pole
summer
line,
cottage of the McDonald's.
that had a pole line and electrics brought in along with that road that was constructed through there.
Hmm.
So the area at one time may have been wetlands, but it was filled and is today.
Yeah, that's what I was basically saying. Just pointing out the fact that it was a wetland, that it was altered long ago by the farmers, and then afterwards with the McDonald's, they put a cottage down there. They put a road and utilities. But the pathway through there was originally part of the topography, part of that wetlands. And the other thing that I find of interest here in the, I think it was WP2 map, where you were talking about the soils. Your description of the soils is a description for a non-wetland soil, highly permeable. Water passes through it regularly. So when you think about that, why would there be a wetland in a soil that's very permeable? It's a perched water table.
This
It's
area,
seasonal.
this area that I showed on this original map, where we didn't have the wetlands that
Right.
was filled. This is Wilbraham, I believe, Mr. Logan will verify. When he gives his presentation, this is a flat plain at Wilbraham. Elevation change is almost nil. As you can see, there are no contour lines running through that area. It's a very flat area. It's a wetland. Everything in green is wetland soils. And as described in the soils report, is a Wilbraham type soil.
Mm-hmm. Would you agree that those soils are supported by the topography of a flat hilltop? If it wasn't flat, if it was inclined, you would never see that. You see that same kind of thing all the way down to Rock Hill School. The whole area is at the tops of all the folds of the bedrock that is in there. And probably well below there, you would eventually, I know you would hit hard pan eventually, bedrock. This has a good soil cover that's been marvelous for farming. One of the most beautiful things about Connecticut, Massachusetts, the southern part, is the Connecticut Valley. It's considered some of the best soils in the world for agriculture. And so in our omnipotent wisdom these days, what do we do with it? Cover it with huge buildings that don't do much of anything except to store things for us to trade. Yeah, I'm just saying that down the middle of that, the whole reason you have the existence of that is topography, which is post-glacial in effect, and you have a permeable soil as based on description. Water passes through it regularly. So the wetlands are a seasonal effect. They're marginal. They're supported by that topography and post-glacial effects. I just find it, I think it's a good plan. Overall, I think it's a fine plan. I hate to see it happen, but as far as protecting the wetlands, it does it. It protects the wetlands, and that's what we want it to do. And no issues about it. I just wanted to comment on the fact you described the soil that lets water pass through easily. That's not usually it's a silty, more organic rich material.
That the soils that I was trying to describe were the upland soils that were the Cheshire and Yalesville soils, not the Wilbraham soils in the
Down the
wetlands.
middle, right. No, I'm in agreement. No issues. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, next.
For that area, again, the reason that we've minimized the wetland incursion is we provided 1-to-1 slopes instead of 2-to-1. The second area is the existing culvert that is in the center of the property that was constructed as part of the approval in '96. It has a 36-inch culvert passing under it. Fill was placed over it in the anticipation of extending the road onto the area to be developed as Building 3. In that, we have 569 square feet of wetland disturbance in order to extend 8 feet out with the culvert, with the flared end being moved, and to put in riprap that was previously on the original plans but was not installed. So we have riprap on both sides just to stabilize the channel. And we have the upland disturbance that it falls within the 50-foot upland review area.
Okay, any questions? Caroline? Ally? Nick?
George, I know we're not supposed to be concerned about the neighbors, but does the Wall Farm have a fresh water? They have a pond in the back there.
Yes.
How does that water discharge off the property?
It charges down through this drainage channel in the middle of this wetland.
So it's feeding the wetlands.
Pardon?
It's feeding the wetlands then.
Yeah. It's a defined channel at least halfway through the property from Wall's farm, so that water coming off his property is coming through that channel, which is where we'll place the culvert underneath the road.
Would you call that a waterway, a brook? What would you call that?
Yeah, I'd call it a waterway.
Intermittent watercourse.
What is it?
It would be an intermittent watercourse. This is George Logan for the record.
Why would it be intermittent when it runs all year long?
It doesn't run year long.
It doesn't?
No.
And who was that speaking?
Again, George Logan for the record. Thank you.
Deb? Mike?
No comments.
Jimmy?
All set.
Okay, next.
That concludes that area. The third area that we have activity is the existing area down adjacent to Building 2 where the stormwater basin was built. A berm was provided on the west side. A pipe was installed with a 3,000-gallon oil water separator, just up gradient leading into the basin. The berm was installed. What we are proposing for activity is in the first photo that I submitted tonight, you can see how growth has been overcome that basin and the area below it. So our activities in that area are listed on the plan, which is to construct a process access way down to the basin, and then further on to the level spreader that is located here. That level spreader was installed. I think one of the photos, the fourth photo, shows Mr. Logan standing in the swale. We need to clean both sides, and in our diagrams on a sheet I will get to, we describe the construction activities involved in order to clean the area of the level spreader. There is also a 4,000-gallon oil water separator that was installed for discharge of the water running from the back of Building 2. That water will go to that oil water separator. The pavement area in the front of the building near Barnes Road will go to the oil water separator near the stormwater basin. So that's the three areas. The one other area on the plan is a very minor filling of the upland review area, probably 5 feet into the 50-foot wide upland review area in order to for our sloping, and also 925 square feet of incursion into the upland review area in this area of Building 1. That's to provide for turnaround for the trucks at the truck bays in the back of the building. So that is the wetland activities that we have proposed. This is the overall project showing our stormwater management basins and underground systems, galley systems that we have provided on this site. As you can see, we have 3 stormwater basins, one that was constructed in the original 96 approval, and 2 we are planning, one for Building 3 and one for Building 1. Now, your regulations require significant attention to all storm events, that we need to show a decrease in the 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, and 100-year storm. In my original plan last month, I didn't have quite the 2-year storm. We didn't have a decrease, so we went back and reviewed all our calculations for the stormwater runoff from this property, and also reviewing you have also a water quality issue that is required to meet 1.3 inches of runoff from the proposed activities from the buildings and the pavement. So in doing recalculating the design, what we did is we provided in the bottom of the basins and in the underground galley systems an area below the invert of the units that will be recharged back to the groundwater. That is significant in that the areas that we are intercepting flow that would have been from the farm fields and the wooded areas to the wetland border down through the center of the property, we have provided for galleys that provide for recharge back to the wetlands in the same kind of area that previously shed to those wetlands. From Building 1, from the center of the building, which shed back to the wetlands, and from this line right here at the top of the ridge of Building 3 that shed. So the areas that went to the wetlands that shed water is basically the lengths of the 2 systems we have for Building 1 and Building 3. Similarly, for Building 2, we have this system is approximately 400 feet. This one's 430 and 300 for the other 2. In order to do that recharge, we also needed to add another component to the stormwater management. And in our design for the storm events, we have come up with a decrease in all the storms. This happens to be the system at the rear of Building 1, which is along Northrop Road. And we've collected our stormwater at either end of the system. We have provided a diversion manhole which directs the 1.3 inches of runoff to a hydrodynamic separator that's sized for the flow for that 1.3 inches. Once we reach that, the water is diverted into the remainder of the system to allow for the management of the runoff. Now, what goes from the hydrodynamic separators, which is the initial removal of oil and sediments, goes into an infiltrator row. The infiltrator row is an arch-shaped unit that has filter fabric wrapped around it and will remove the fine sediments that pass the hydrodynamic separator. And we've pretty much trapped, in the hydrodynamic separator, we trap between 83 and 93% of the suspended solids. And the infiltrator rows have been used on themselves to also meet that 80% requirement from the state. So basically, we have a hydrodynamic separator that we're reaching 80, and from the solids in the soil, in the runoff, we've also potential for an 80% from just the isolator row. These are discharged out an 8 or 6 inch pipe to the wetlands. So this whole area, the bottom 6 inch or 5 inches, will be recharged to the soil. Anything above that will be released at a slow rate so that we maintain the reduction in the overall stormwater runoff. If you have any questions at this point in time.
Any questions, Carolyn? Ally?
George, you went through all this malarkey to design this. What happens, the 3 buildings you're going to put in, all the biofiltration for the wetlands or the stormwater to be filtered through before it hits the reservoir? Now you're going to capture it all and enclose it, and you're not really sure what's going to happen.
Well, you've...
Now let him finish.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no,
Go ahead.
I'm just not sure, I've never heard anything about the pond, which I would want to argue with Mr. Logan about, because I've been up there in the summer, I've been up there in the fall, and I've been up there in the spring, and the water does run down through there pretty well. The cows use it to cool their legs and their bellies in the summer, and they drink out of it in the winter. So I'm just concerned about all this, the environmental biofiltrations that's happening right now. You're going to put 3 buildings in there, and somehow you're going to configure all the water goes into the reservoir. Yes or no?
Well, it's going there now, Nick.
It's what? It's
The water's going there now.
It's got a chance to biofilter through the soils. You keep talking about the types of soils. It's got a chance to biofilter through them to get rid of all the impurities.
You have a percentage that you're going to absorb that will go into the ground, and a percentage is going to be overland because to the wetland area. This portion of the property flows in this direction. You'll have a higher percentage that will flow directly into the wetland than you will that will be recharged into the ground. depending on whether you're farming it or you've left it to grow back and you're going to have runoff. There's a coefficient we use as the percentage that runs off and then it's reabsorbed. The areas that we're discussing that flow to this wetland, we're providing a similar length of 50 by 400 feet by a half a foot deep, that is going directly back into the ground. Now we pre-treat it for the hydrocarbons and the suspended solids with the hydrodynamic separator. Those basically spin it. The oil floats on the surface. The suspended solids, to a degree, get dropped out, and the first 1.3 inches goes into that infiltrator row, which is wrapped with filter fabric, and that picks up some of the fines that are in the water, are trapped there. We provide a manhole that on either end that you could put a water jet in there, and if you get a buildup inside that plastic galley, which is an arch-shaped unit that's up wide, up high, wrapped in filter fabric, you can run a jet through there and bring that material out and clean it. So this is to mimic what we wanted for the water going back into the ground that was getting to the wetlands. The surface water that ran there to the reservoir, we are trapping for a period to reduce the peak flow because we put the pavement in the building there. So in essence, this is 400 feet long by 40 feet wide of open galleys and stone. That's going to trap water but release it, and all the water goes back to the same point, the wetlands and eventually to the reservoir.
Now, you talked about 97. There's things that were in place that haven't been maintained. Who's gonna maintain your configuration here you're gonna put in?
The owners of the property, we provide a maintenance plan, and on one of the sheets we define how to handle all the events that would needed for stormwater management of the structures, of any spills, of any significant spills. DEP, they have a set, it's part of your package, of stormwater maintenance for all those items. And one of the drawings that I provided shows each of the structures, refers back to the maintenance plan, which you have, and describes what is the requirement, how many times a year you need to look at each one of these structures. So we provided you with what you need to do in order to maintain what we've added to the plan.
And is this the same management that was in 97 for the ones that are the existing ones that are now that haven't been maintained?
Yeah, but nothing was built, Nick, except the structures. Nothing was built on that site. So it's been left to, nothing was attached to it. The structures put in place. This basin was built because it was required. We had to get approval from you in order to build the plan for this one site. And this is the PIP plan you approved. The red line is the wetland line. We built right up to the wetland line. We built this, and we had a basin, the water quality basin here with a berm and an overflow. We had the crossing here for the extension of the road. The culvert was put in. The fill was brought on top in order to get across it. And the structure, the oil water grit separator, 3,000 gallons here, and the 4,000 gallons here with the 150-foot level spreader were built, but nothing went from there. We did the activities that were needed for our wetland permit and then stopped. We're now reincorporating them some 28 years later. They're overgrown. The idea is we need to bring them back to what their intended purpose was by clearing the brush and trees that have grown into those. And in our plan, we call for 6 feet outside this level spreader, which is 150 feet long. Review the structure, the 4,000 gallon structure. Same with the 3,000. We're putting in a riprap plunge pool at the basin of the 24-inch pipe coming out into this. The wall, a nice wall was built here, brownstone blocks. And instead of this configuration, which involves a disturbance of more wetlands, we provided an 8-inch pipe through with a riprap emergency spillway and a little bit of riprap outside the wetlands in order for that basin to function. Now, prior to that basin, we come back into the 3,000 gallon oil water separator, back to 300 and some feet of underground galleys that are 30-inch high by 300 feet by 35 feet wide. And then on either end of it, we have, again, the same setup that I demonstrated in the other underground system. We've got a hydrodynamic separator, a diversion manhole, and an observation manhole for cleaning. One at either end, in the front and in the back. The front one goes to the basin. The rear section goes to the level spreader. So it's not that we didn't maintain them, we stopped activity on the property.
All right, my last question is, are you going to provide us with water quality today and then post-construction water quality?
Yes.
And who will do that? Is that done by the state? Is that done by Mr. Logan?
I don't know whether we included in our presentation testing of the water coming off the property. I'm not sure that might have been Dave's portion of the project that I didn't catch about.
And you're not concerned about there may be a fluctuation in it?
For what we have for an industrial site as compared to, I believe Mr. Logan, I don't want to put words into his mouth, what the activities would be for issues in the reservoir. But we do have, I've got, as part of the plans, we do have these hydrodynamic separators provide between 83% and 93% in reduction of the suspended solids and the floatable materials.
Thank you, George.
Debbie, any questions? Mike?
No question.
Jimmy?
Did I hear you say you could jet clean these, the upper chamber here?
The first row,
Yeah.
I think. A lot of these designs don't have an ability to get to the isolator row. We provide an additional manhole that you can get down in and put a water jet up and remove the sediments if they build up in that isolator row. We do have an observation port to determine if we're getting sediments in there, but we have the catch basins on the ends. We provided that just for being able to do that.
Yeah, I found that, I was first going to ask about longevity, and then I heard you mention a possibility of cleaning so you don't have to remove them ever. I think that's a great concept. If it does what it's supposed to do, remove, it's going to eventually build up. which requires either replacement or cleaning. I see it's provided for cleaning, which I think is a very good move in engineering.
Thank you.
Okay, next.
Mr. Logan?
Yes, before I start, this is George Logan, Ram Ecological Services. I want to pass a couple of things off to you.
Don't like a lot of this stuff passed out the night of the meeting.
I think these are just highlights from Mr. Logan's report, and they're in color, so I think it's just, this is that kind of a handout.
Again, for the record, George Logan, professional wetland scientist, senior ecologist, and registered soil scientist. What I've done is not really new material. This is just to keep me in the right place, so I don't go this way or that way, which I think you should appreciate, Mr. Chairman. So that's the presentation outline that I have here. So the first thing I like to do is to reference a couple of things. There are 3 reports in the record. The first one that you probably remember, it was an on-site soil investigation and wetland delineation report dated October 2022. That's has to do with the wetland delineations. Subsequently, there was a wetlands assessment report, summary of findings, that was October 30th of 2024. And finally, in trying to do the best we can to respond to some of your staff's questions over a period of time, we submitted a January 29th wetlands assessment supplemental answering those questions. What I'd like to do today is just a kind of an overview of the materials, focusing on what's there as far as existing conditions, and talk a little bit of proposed conditions, even though we've been talking about that for a while. As you know, the overall site is 47.71 acres. We have about 10 acres of wetlands that were delineated back in 2022 by myself. The soils there predominantly are Wilbraham Menlo. So Wilbraham probably, for the most part, Menlo, which is the very poorly drained component, there's probably some spots where that's the case. Also, we inventoried the wetlands, again, June and July of 2022, and then October 2024. As you know, much of the site's uplands are post-agricultural. Cessation of row crops production happened sometime around 2023. The site includes young woods, which were used to be orchards, as you've seen probably some of the figures that I provided. Probably had some pasture too, but there's mature woodland in the northwestern portion of the site. Some of the largest trees are there. Again, we looked at our archived aerial photography, which kind of verified that this was all agriculture until sometime in the 1980s, they abandoned fruit production. So the orchard went away. The site's delineated wetlands are associated with what I would call 2 systems. We have the central system, as you know, there's a ditched intermittent watercourse. So if you go back and look at some of the archival aerial photographs, you'll see that this watercourse, which is an intermittent watercourse, is a straight line, and then it takes 45 degree, and then it's a straight line again all the way down to the reservoir. So that system is centrally located, and then we have, that's what we call the B system, wetland B system, and the wetland A system is the one that's proximal to the reservoir itself, and includes a portion of that ditched watercourse, and that's just past the existing crossing that happened back in the 90s that had been approved by this commission. The wetland B system includes the prominent wet meadow in the middle, which you've seen from, at least from photographs, which is dominated by recanary grass, sort of an agricultural type system, as well as some young forested swamp and scrub shrub wetlands, and the forested swamp is to the north of the emergent wetland, or the recanary wetland, and that's where the old farm road used to go through. And wetland A system includes a mosaic of wet meadow and scrub shrub with a data associated ditch watercourse coming all the way down to the reservoir, as well as we have forested swamp, especially in the northern portion, scrub shrub, and if we have some shallow and deep marsh right at the edge of the reservoir as well. Now, the North Farms reservoir was investigated, obviously, when we were doing our inventories. We didn't go in it, but we also did some sufficient research to find out what was going on there. And thankfully, the Connecticut Agricultural Experiments Station had done and has been doing water quality evaluations and also looking at the aquatic vegetation for some time. The data show that in 2004, this body of water was considered to be highly eutrophic or hyper-eutrophic. It had a secudisc transparency of 0.5 meter. And this is, if you know what a secudisc is this disc which has white and black in 4 quadrats. And as you put it down in the water, when that disappears, you can't see the difference between the white and the black. That's your secudisc, and that's sort of a way to figure out what the clarity of the water is. So that's back in 2024. And then there was subsequent times of data collection, and then we get to 2020. And we found out that the reservoir has improved substantially. The secudisc transparency now is 2 meters, and it's no longer hyper-eutrophic, it's now eutrophic. We believe that the culprit for the issue with the reservoir was the agriculture that's been happening in its watershed, which is, I believe, about 487 acres, and I do have a picture in one of the reports that I submitted. And also internal loading, because when you have a lot of input of nutrients, they kind of cycle and just kind of feed on itself. You have this internal loading. The limiting nutrient here, so that you would know, is phosphorus. That's the culprit.
And where did that generate from?
From the agriculture, from the soils, and from fertilizers that are put down for agriculture. And I'll get back to that because that's something we need to address as far as proposed conditions are concerned. Wetland functions and values was part of my report. It's a sort of methodology we use as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers descriptive approach. There's a little summary there that you see that came out of the report. So wetland A, again, is what's close to the reservoir, and you can see that has a whole bunch of what we would call primary or principal functions. That's the red with a P. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's a lot. And a lot has to do that with the diversity of the different cover types and the fact that you have the reservoir. That leads to increasing the functions and values. Wetland B, not so much. You have 3 principal functions, but obviously you have other ones that are secondary and present. Now let's go a little bit to the activities. I think those have already been discussed to a great degree, so I'm not going to go into it too much. We have 3,778 square feet with those 2 crossings that we talked about. And then we have a little more, I guess, for doing something with our existing detention basin that needs to be renovated. So that's kind of a disturbance, but it's really temporary. This hard wetland disturbance, which is the filling, represents less than 1% of the total wetland acreage on the site, 0.86%. Activities within the 50-foot buffer, I think we can see that we've tried to maintain more than 90% of that, and we have about ½ acre of activity within the upland review area, and that's mostly for the 2 crossings. Potential short-term impacts. Obviously, that's a consideration that we need to keep in mind, and the reason for it is because So when the agriculture was happening there, there's more phosphorus. So there's probably a supersaturation of phosphorus because of what's happened there within the soils. Now we're going in and we're disturbing the soils. So we have to be careful not to, during the construction period, allow for additional phosphorus to get into the reservoir, because that's not a good thing. Looking at the plans, we have very robust erosion sedimentation control plans. And the good thing also is that the soils are not considered to be highly erosible. You know, they have, and I included that in a report to show you how that was. And we follow the Connecticut DEP, the revised erosion sedimentation control guidelines. But because of the fact that when we disturbed agricultural soils, which might have a little more saturation with phosphorus within their soils, especially the topsoil, we need to be careful. So one of the things that are recommended has to do with this. And what this is absorptive media that's basically absorbs phosphorus. It's a granular product. And what would happen is you have in certain critical areas, especially also downgrading of the temporary sediment basins, which are going to be collecting all this, should we call it dirty water, that we want to collect and treat. There's already going to be something below it, and there's two erosion control silt fence, let's say, and hay bales. So what would happen is that absorptive media would go right between them. So it'd be a sandwich with silt fence on one side and hay bales on the other. And that will absorb any phosphorus that might come through if there's a little bit of an overflow, even though the TSTs are supposed to be sized for the 2-year storm. So in my report, my latest report, I know that there was a discussion about using a independent soil erosion control monitor, but I had not carefully looked at the erosion sedimentation controls. And once I started looking at them and figuring out that we do have phasing and that we have some belt and suspender stuff that we're using, I have changed my mind, and I don't think that an independent erosion control monitor would be necessary. That doesn't mean we have to maintain and we have to monitor everything. Now, as far as long-term indirect impacts to wetland hydrology, obviously there's been a lot of discussion here already. And what we don't want to do is to starve the wetlands, obviously, from water. Mr. Carter explained how we're doing that by making sure that we're mimicking the pre-construction to post-construction watersheds and make sure that the wetlands get fed. And as Mr. Howman said, these wetlands here are sort of have a little perch water table situation because you have bedrock somewhere low, and then on top of that you have your till. So what happens is the water comes down and hits the more restricted portion of the till and just kind of rides down that and feeds the wetlands. So we're doing that, we're mimicking that with our underground galleries, obviously. But there was one little thing that I caught. And remember we talked about was a little small isolated wetland that's in that northwestern portion of the site. And you can kind of see it, there's that little circle up there that you see. And if you look at the existing watershed, even though that wetland does receive some water from off-site, from the farm, comes down, you can see the contours. We are taking a portion of the watershed out. So the thought was that we're going to take a portion of the roof and we're going to put it down to a level spreader stone trench to feed that wetland. And also at the same time, we'll feed the woods, the nice forest below it, so that keeps having some good water. So that was one change that we put in. It's in the plans. Now, as far as water quality is concerned, I know we're all concerned about the reservoir. And again, the issue is phosphorus. That's the limited nutrient for that. And we're following the Stormwater Quality Manual, the 2023, which tells us that we need to take the 1.3, the runoff event from a 1.3 inch precipitation off our catchment areas that are going to our best management practices. That equates with 90% of the water that falls from the sky annually on average. So we went from 1 inch to 1.3 inch. So that's going to be infiltrated, which in itself cleans the water out, and particularly these soils. They're not so coarse or they're not so fine. And so the water that's going to reach the wetlands from that, so we say dirtier water, which is the first flush, will be more than sufficiently clean. And then we have this built-in suspenders kind of situation with the hydrodynamic separators and the isolator row. And if each one of them are doing 80%, when you have best management practices in series, you don't have 80 plus 80%, but you're going to have more than 90%, which is the golden standard as far as the Stormwater Quality Manual says. We have to hit 90%. It used to be 80. Now we have to hit 90. And again, most of the phosphorus that could potentially be released to the environment, yes, there's a dissolved portion, understood, but there's also a high particulate portion. So to the extent that we can take out the fine particulate matter, which we would do with this series, then we're doing amazingly well as far as taking care of phosphorus and not letting it be exported to the lake. But here's something that's interesting too. And if you do a little research and see, and there's all kinds of research that's been done looking at the loading or the export of phosphorus, in particular here, from agricultural land, from commercial land, from industrial land, from residential land. And if you compare row crops with industrial on average, what you find out that the export pollutant loading, and this is before you do anything to clean it, agricultural crops have twice the loading than from an industrial, even before you do anything to clean the water out. So by itself, by taking out the agriculture, we're actually helping the lake. All right, so potential long-term impact, wetland impacts to wetland functions and values. Again, I always look at that, and I would say that the impact will be considered of minimal intensity. So what I'm saying is that the functions and values that these wetlands are providing, whether it's wildlife habitat, whether it's, taking out nutrients and transforming nutrients, et cetera, will continue to be there at the same levels as they are today. And now I know your staff has talked about a slight missing element that probably at some point we need to discuss. I have an opinion about it, and here it is. The discussion was that there are some invasive species in certain areas where there are high concentrations that we could take out. Okay, that would be a good thing, especially where we're coming close to the clearing and into the buffer. And or we can put some mitigated planting, seeding, seed mixes and the like in some of these areas. And we haven't really specified exactly, but honestly, my opinion is that this is something that could be worked out administratively, where, staff and I could sit down and say, okay, how about here, how about there? Yes, removal of invasives, some plantings here. But we're willing to do that with staff. So the conclusion is that long-term direct and indirect impacts to wetlands and watercourse functions and values, again, are minimal intensity. And under the proposed conditions, the on-site and off-site wetlands will continue to provide functions and values at the pre-development levels. We're very close to it. And I do not think there will be a significant adverse impact long-term to the regulated resources, including, and more importantly, the North Farms Reservoir. And that concludes my formal presentation. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, commissioners, questions? Caroline?
Yes, I have one. In your report, you had mentioned that in 2023 and 2024, you were looking for the eagle nests, and you didn't observe any nesting or foraging. And then you did submit a little excerpt from an email that came in late this January. Have you looked at all since 2024 and today in that area to make sure that you have not found anything? Could you say anything about?
No, so what Mr. Brian Hess, by the way, it's the DEEP coordinator, wildlife biologist, does all our endangered raptors, peregrine falcons, bald eagles, carriers, etc. And I had a subsequent communication with him because my question to him after he said, well, there used to be a nest on that island. You know, this is a little island that we have there in the middle, but it's no longer there. But that's a couple of years old, his observation, so he doesn't know if it's come back. We didn't see any eagles at any time. We saw a lot of swans, white swans, and they're still there. So yeah, one would have to look at it. But here's the thing. So I asked them the question. We're 600 feet or so away from a potential nest if they rebuilt it, which they may. In my opinion, based on probably having now observed a half a dozen eagle nests over the past 15, 20 years, the guidance from the Fish and Wildlife Service, which kind of almost trumps what we say here in the state because it's also listed federally, is that you needed a minimum of a 200-foot non-disturbance area, minimum, so that they like more. They like more like 600. So here we have more than 600 from the closest building, which is building number 3. And the nice thing about building number 3 is that all the activity is on the other side. It's not towards the pond. There's an emergency road that goes behind it for fire apparatus if need be, hopefully not. So that's good. And then the other thing I've observed, and I give you the example there of my closest eagle nest to where I live, which is literally about 4.5, 5 miles down in Manchester, where you can look it online. It's hilarious. You have a big white pine, and the eagles are up there, and the parking lot's literally 50 feet away from the edge of the woods, and maybe 75 feet from the eagle nest, maybe more if you're looking at that way. And every time I go to Big Y, I prefer Stop and Shop, but don't tell anyone. I see people with long cameras sitting there. And now we have the new Tesla superchargers, and these people are parking their cars, and they come out and take pictures while they're charging their cars. And the eagles don't seem to mind because they have good habitat nearby, and they have Union Pond, they have the Hockenham River. So eagles have acclimated or could acclimate. So I'm not really concerned of that. But having said that, I did ask Mr. Hess, I said, what's the best time for us to have the most intense activity? And he said, well, late summer through fall. Because by that time, the fledglings are out, by July.
Sure.
There's not much activity in the nest anymore because they obviously breed a lot earlier.
And I just have one more question. You had mentioned that there were phases, and then you say that there's going to be a temporary reduction in the wildlife usage expected during construction, except for this far north end. So how long, and I'm sorry if I missed this, do you anticipate this disruption, reduction of wildlife usage to be? How long are these phases? How long is the building?
It's kind of hard to tell. I mean, obviously, we're not going to kid ourselves that when we have machinery running around and, within 50, 60 feet of wetlands, there's going to be, the tolerant species are going to go, we don't care. So the song sparrows will still sing, and the amphibians and the reptiles will still be there because they're going to be more in the wetland because they're sensitive to vibration. But some of the more sensitive species, I mentioned green heron, right? It might say, I'm out of here. I'm going to hang out in the reservoir for a while. But once that activity ceases, then all these more intolerant species to auditory disturbance, because that's what it is, most of it. You know, the clanking of the back of a you know, the truck or something like that. So that's all going to return. But there is obviously a temporary disturbance, but that really doesn't affect the physical characteristics of the wetlands, which is the main part.
And you had no timeline for the temporary piece? Like how long is temporary?
If it's 18 months, it's only during the part of the 18 months when the wildlife activity will be most intense, which would be the breeding season, say, or a good portion of the growing season. But then the habitat, once that is done, the species will return. They'll populate from other areas.
Ally?
Maybe, I noticed you had an absence of squirrels. Maybe our 3 resident eagles on that reservoir are the reason why you don't have squirrels and chipmunks so much. Huh? And that includes a brown-headed youngster.
Yeah, well, eagles are amazing, actually. They're scavengers and they're predators.
Well, they scavenge and they fish, and it's iced over now, and they also do hunt.
Yeah, they're like Americans. We do everything.
They're opportunists.
Nick? Debbie?
No.
Mike?
No question.
Jimmy?
Not so much questions. I think, Mr. Vitale, you could perhaps enlighten a little bit on this too. I think this whole area of the North Farms Reservoir was originally a wet meadows, and then it was turned into a reservoir to collect water for industrial application. So it's never been used for potable purposes. That's an important thing when people hear the word reservoir. Make you think of the things that we use for our utilization of drinking. That is not the case here. And farming has been very difficult for that shallow water area, especially in summertime. Historically, I can remember as a young child in that area, when in the summer you'd have a fish kill. And you wouldn't want to be within a mile of that reservoir, seriously. It was pretty horrible. And then, of course, they get out there with a rowboat and 100 pounds of copper sulfate in a burlap bag and spend the day paddling around until it was all dissolved and the algae would go away. So it is very true what has been described here tonight. This particular activity here will perhaps, definitely, I would say, improve the quality of that reservoir. However, you can't eat the products that come off of it where you do with agriculture. It's a trade-off. Quite honestly, it's a trade-off, and it's one that our society has adopted, and we accept it. And I think it's very important to have improvements, even though it's never going to be intended. I wouldn't expect it to be intended for human potability. We're going to extremes to bring it to a quality that eventually could lead to a point, however, where it could be filtrated and used for human application. So in that regard, although it's not going to be used for agriculture, I think it's admirable to do the best you can to use the best technologies you have for the filtration processes for long-term utilization of that land. Do I like seeing this happen? Well, of course not, I don't. But at the same token, we live in a society where we have to move forward, so we've got to make compromises. And I think this has demonstrated here throughout everything that's been changed, and even to the point of tonight where we're getting things that we really don't like to get at the last minute. All of these efforts are doing one thing that I can see. It's showing an improvement of things down the road. We are doing things better than we've done in the past. Are they perfect? Absolutely not. We do it. End of perfection right there. But we're doing the best we can to utilize our resources in the best possible way. Maybe not, but at least we're doing it with thoughtful concerns. So I commend the effort that everyone puts into these things, and I would hope it would go well.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I know this particular thing you haven't gotten, but it was mentioned and referenced in my latest report. So I just
Your
wanted,
next report?
no, my latest report, which was the January 29th report.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just mention, one last thing. We're talking here about these detention processes, which we do all the time. Personally, I'd love to go out and look at this area as a site investigation and also look across the street to look at the consequences, the seeds that this commission has sown, to see what is going on with detention basins such as across the street. And to recognize what we are doing again here, hopefully with more and more improvements on how we're going to manage them in the future. It's good to see basins that are put in light of exposure, where people are going to see them every time they drive by. The minute you start hiding them, no one looks at them anymore, and they get forgotten. And we see this around town as something that sooner or later, this town and all towns are going to have to address if we want to continue to move forward. So that was just a thought about if we ever do a site investigation to look at something like this, we should look at the ones that we have already done as a point of comparison.
Okay. Aaron, any immediate concerns?
I have a lot of questions and concerns. I don't know how much time you want me to take up. I can, if we're going to go the next month, I'd have time to meet with them and work it all out. But I could hit the high points tonight of the things that weren't responded to.
Well, let me then, I don't know what you have for high points. I mean, if this is going to get tabled and not acted upon tonight, not tabled, but continued, you can get these things resolved. If this thing is going to be acted upon tonight, and if there's technical things that need to be straightened out, they can be done in your office. I'm not sure which way the commission feels on going, but I think at this point, let's bring the public in. It's a public hearing. Go ahead.
Do you want me just to hit the categories of the high points?
Just don't get into details, but pick out the category.
We gotta spiff up the list of regulated activities. I found a lot of discrepancies. George Logan's figure is about 900 square feet off from George Cotter's figure. George Cotter's is higher for impact in the wetland by about 900 feet, and I would add a few more. And one thing that we can talk about is the existing storm basin has to be considerably reworked. And I would submit that
What needs to be reworked? I'm sorry.
the existing storm basin located on the edge of the reservoir in the southwest corner of the property, it needs a lot of work. And I don't mean just cutting down trees. I imagine, I haven't asked how many trees, maybe 40 trees.
Yeah, but that's maintenance that should never have grown.
I wouldn't call it maintenance. It has been lying idle for 35 years, and the reason they're interested in working in there is they're developing the site now. So it's a development. There's an existing, apparently the survey shows an existing outlet control structure. The survey shows it, so we haven't talked about that has to be taken out. Apparently, I don't know, George mentioned they're not going to use it anymore. I don't know what was found faulty with it. It has to be taken out, and they've redesigned something called a basin outlet structure. I don't know the difference, but it is different. And a swale, and it's, right now it's over on state property.
Why did you think that whole structure needs to be taken out and replaced with something else?
I don't know, maybe George can enlighten us.
Well, I think he explained it tonight, that structure was to satisfy, I'm not sure what building number, but the building on Barnes Road. So it's still going to handle Barnes Road.
Since the last meeting, he's changed the design, so I don't know what was wrong with the old outlet control structure that you want to take it out and do a different structure.
The old outlet control structure was an emergency spillway. My belief is that basin should have a small outlet pipe, which we're providing an 8-inch pipe outside the wetlands to allow for low flow discharge from that basin. The berm that was built, it's going to function differently than we may have anticipated in 96, and therefore I recommended the 8-inch pipe through the berm for low-flow discharge, to not have that basin permanently, potentially full. The issue of, we are providing maintenance to the basin, which is removal of all growth that's been around that basin. I think we said within a 10-foot of the berm on the reservoir side, and we provided an access road on the south side.
Okay. All right, what else you got, Aaron?
I have a lot of things. Okay, so one thing I asked for in my comments was for the weir, the location on all their temporary set basins. I don't know, you got like 6 of them maybe? Where the weir is, where it is going to, the weir, the outlet point, where the sedimented flow is going to go out. I'm interested in all of them that are close to wetlands, but in particular, I'm very interested in the one that's by where we were just talking. There's one now to be located right next to this existing storm basin that we're just talking about on the edge of the reservoir. That's the one I'm most interested in. But all of them were supposed to have, the weir was going to be drawn on the plans, and I don't have that. I have a question about the crossing. It's an 18-inch culvert. So this is just for my edification. The stream today, like if we go out there, it's about 5 feet across. So it's an 18-inch, okay, but that area also floods. So I'm just asking, why you picked 18-inch size culvert?
We're not going to get into that because there's too many issues. I'm going to open this up to the public now. I want to get the public's comments in because I think this is going to be continued, that my feeling is. But anyway, this is a public hearing. I'll take comments from the public. Remember, name and address for the record.
Mary Mashinsky, 188 South Cherry Street in Wallingford. I'm state representative in 85th District and also executive director of River Advocates of South Central Connecticut. I work extensively on water quality and wildlife in that job. I'm glad that the commission is concerned with the public values of the reservoir and is doing your best to ensure that the applicant will protect those values. I can hear it in your questions. It's a largely undeveloped shoreline, which is rare in South Central Connecticut. It's a large but shallow body of water, 64 acres. And most of it is undeveloped along the shoreline except on the west side. So the north, east, and south, except for the parking lot, are undeveloped largely, which means it's used by the public for boating, at least till the aquatic plants get too thick in the later summer. It's used for fishing and for bird watching. People are there sometimes doing eagle photography out of the back of their car. So it's a draw for the public in Wallingford and other communities around here. There's 122 different bird species recorded at North Farms Reservoir on Cornell's eBird list. The eagles have been there since 2009, the osprey since 2006. There's rusty blackbirds, which are unusual birds, hooded mergansers, buffleheads, shovelers, widgeons, green-winged teal, rough-winged swallows, and so on. There are 5 bald eagles there now. As of a few days ago, they were recorded on the eBird by 2 local bird watchers. There was eagle nesting on the island for several years. I can't find the nest now. I think it has fallen down. So I agree with George Logan. It appears to be down this year and last year. The adults, when they are nesting on the island, the other adult sits on the east shore where this project is going to be built. And so it's important that we preserve perching trees on the east shore. After the disturbance of building the thing, the project is finished, they may return to the nest and they will want to perch on the shore. So I'm hoping that as many trees as possible will be retained on the east shore. That's been their habit of the eagles. And thank you to Commissioner Reyes for asking about the eagles. The old reservoir does have a history of fish kills and heavy aquatic vegetative growth due to the excess nutrients. And I agree with George Logan that most likely reason for the earlier fish kills is agriculture, and it's actually been improving since then. The depth is so shallow, 6 feet or under or less, that the excess nutrients plus the sunlight coming in through the 6 feet does build up that vegetation. So the stormwater collection system has to be best available technology, and the commission needs to make sure that we will be reducing the nutrient loading and doing whatever is possible to make that older system on the site work correctly. I hope the commission will require a 50-foot, if you can fit it in there, a 50-foot vegetative buffer with shrubs and emergent vegetation between the buildings, which probably are going to have a lawn around them a little bit. So between the buildings and lawn and the lake, there should be, if possible, a 50-foot vegetative buffer. And the reason would be to maintain the wildlife values, reduce the fish kills, absorb the nutrients, and hopefully keep the eagle population in place, which the public does enjoy. The feature that the developer has come up with for the groundwater recharge is a commendable feature. It's clever. And one challenge that I run into in river advocates in other towns is that sometimes the system put in is a very good system, but then it is not maintained. And when it first works, when it's put in, and then supposedly someone is going to maintain it, change the filters and so on, and then they don't come back and do that, and the system does not work anymore. So, if you need to put a bond on it to make sure the filters are changed or whatever, that would ensure that into the future, the filtration system will work. Up to the commission if you want to do that, but just to ensure that this very sophisticated system will work into the future, that's my concern. If you can do the 50-foot buffer, that'll remove the excess nutrients. It will improve the water quality and protect the wildlife values. And I very much appreciate George Logan's attention to the phosphorus problem. He has hit it on the head, and it seems as if the proposal will address that and prevent it from returning. So those are good features. And thank you for your attention to protecting this reservoir, which is a really nice public area that the public really appreciates. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? I find the North Farms Reservoir a very interesting body of water. Like Jim Heilman talked about, it was created for an industrial site down the center of town. And stockpiled water. Shallow, but I always heard that there was actually properties around the reservoir that owned out into the reservoir. That it's not the perimeter water line where the properties end. I don't know if Midwood has that case or not, but I think maybe up at the north end of that. Mary talked about undeveloped land. I think the north end, I'm pretty sure it's been developed, and what's left undeveloped was going to stay undeveloped. I think that was the buffer that's there. Not only your property, but other industrial developments. So it would be great to see North Farms cleaned up. Of course, and when the reduction or the reduction of contamination, allowing an increase in transparency of 2 meters, I think in '96, I fought hard that, what are you kidding me? Agricultural caused this to be contaminated. I remember the arguments clearly. And it took me a day or two to realize I was wrong, that the agricultural community was adding contaminants into the reservoir through fertilizers and mercury. I think two things have taken place on all agricultural properties. The cost of fertilizer is so expensive, there's no excess fertilizer being sowed. It's, if it needs it, it's more accurately spent. In this location, the farm community, the milk cow or the cow community that feeds into this watershed has greatly reduced. I think Tom Wall's herd of cows is minimal. If there's anything, is there any still there, Nick? Yeah, that's right, there's a couple, but from a complete milking herd, they're down to a very low volume. So between the reduction of cows, the high cost of fertilizer, the watching of all these things, phosphorus reduction, and I think that's added to the improvement of the transparency of the water, and it's good to see it. A lot of people talk about the North Farms Reservoir. Okay, no other comments from the public. Commissioners got any more comments?
I just want to ask Erin why we've had this almost 3 months in front of us, and she's got a bunch of questions that haven't been answered. Did you provide these questions to the applicant, and they refused to answer them?
No, you got them in your packet on January 10th. I had like 6 pages of comments. On January 17th, another 5 pages of comments. Friday afternoon, they came in. Maybe they've answered 80% of the comments, and that was Friday afternoon. And I've got like, just today, I went over it. I sat down with a plan, and I talked to George on the phone. Oh gosh, I've got like 30 questions so far, like discrepancies, little things. They can tweak it. I'm sure they just needs a little cleanup. And also I'd like to look at conditions of approval, look at mitigations, plantings, you know, that kind of thing.
I thought we talked about having this all resolved so the night of the meeting we could either determine to approve or deny this application. We weren't going to do the 11th hour. I've got a whole bunch of questions to ask him. Now, is Mr. Carter responsible for not answering the questions on time? You talked to him, was this last Friday?
Oh, I talked to him today. He changed a bunch of stuff, most of it for the good. So I'm glad he changed things, but these have to be reviewed. You know, there's a 900 square foot discrepancy in the wetland impact between the ecologist and the engineer, and I've got a few more. So we're the Wetland Commission. We got to get that right. Regulated activities. I asked for a list.
Well, can we move forward with this, or will you need to hold this up for another month so you can get your questions answered? But if it's going to be a waiting...
I should point out the water, we forgot to mention, everybody forgot to mention, the Water Division came in with comments, which they've been provided to. The Water Division is fine with it. That would concern the watershed on the east side. They're shunting the water the other way. So that eliminates the need to meet the Wallingford watershed special district requirements. The engineer came back with comments in December. She hasn't come back with comments on the new plan. Obviously not. She just got it Friday night. So I expect she'll have comments coming in.
Now, why did she get it on Friday night when you've had it every staff meeting? You have a staff meeting once a month or once a week?
No, we got it Friday night. We got all this, the stuff you got Friday night in your packet, I got Friday afternoon at 2:30. All that material, the new material. And the reports tonight, all this tonight too.
Do you feel as though we can move forward with this, or you feel these questions need to be answered?
I think we addressed the questions. It's whether she's had time to digest them. We put the plans in Friday. Unfortunately, my partner that was the lead on this project has spent a month with surgeries back and forth. He's just had his second one Monday on the same eye. He lost his sight again, so we were a little later than we thought in getting the plans back there. And we also got reports through January, the 10th and 17th. So, but I feel we've addressed all the issues on the plans. What we put on the plans is what we've measured for the square footage. If it's a minor number between his report and my report, what we've shown on the plans, we've added all that information. I just think Erin hasn't had time to digest it. That sheet that you see there is a construction sequence for each of the building phases. We go through on I haven't discussed, but in the plans is the temporary basin locations on the plans. If there's some minor items that need to be resolved out, I feel that can be done upon approval. But I feel the plans are complete.
Aaron, do you believe that this can be worked out without having to drag it out another month? Earth to Aaron.
No, how many sheets are this? This is like 16-sheet site plan set. These are 3 buildings. Each one could stand on its own as its own development. There's a lot going on this property. At this moment, we have no report back from the town engineer. I've got a host of little things that I'm sure George Cotter could help with. And as far as, invasives, I'm more interested in mitigation plantings such as that Representative Baczynski mentioned along the river. Right now, there's work on state land. Like, I don't think, maybe that was an oversight. You got to get over about 8 feet off the state property with your swale there, your bioswale. Little things like that. I've got questions. I mean, I could go on and on if you want to hear them.
No, I don't want to go on. I thought they would be addressed before tonight because we'd like to make the decision whether yay or nay it. Now it sounds like you've got enough questions or concerns that we need to hold it over for another month. And what are we going to do in this month time period? You and George are going to have conversations, and we're going to come back next month and approve it. I think George is flexible enough that he'll agree.
We could meet in the middle of the month. We could have a special meeting just for the cleanup and the.
No, I'm not coming to a special meeting because you dragged your feet and the answers weren't.
I'm
done.
sorry, I didn't drag my feet.
Oh, whatever. Maybe you're overworked. Then we should talk about whatever. What's the rest of the commission want to do? Do you want to go forward or do you want to table it till next month?
I'll take the opinion. Deb?
Oh, I guess I'd want to see the rest of whatever questions she had.
Do an extension of it?
We could certainly grant an extension
Already
if that's
granted.
necessary.
Jimmy?
I don't think you want to table it. You might extend it, but not table it.
Well, that's correct.
Sorry, I used the wrong word.
Would it be a continuance of the public hearing?
Yes.
All right, so it seems like the majority of the commission wants to extend the public hearing to resolve Aaron's 16 pages of questions.
And the town engineer, I will.
You haven't even got that far yet. You're going to get it done. This is what we go through monthly.
Sure. We'll have, Mr. Carter will meet with Aaron and go over some of the specifics. It may just be, there are a lot of pages. It may be that, the answer to her question's there, it's just not clear, and he could point that out to her. So we'll be happy to do that between now and the next meeting.
Good.
To resolve that.
Okay, so I'm going to continue this public hearing to March. So we're not closing the public hearing. It's 9 o'clock. I think we opened it. I didn't measure the time we opened it at. 8:15 or 8:20, something, 7:15, 7:30.
I'll find it on
No,
video.
I wrote it down. It was
All
7.
right, so it's in your minutes,
I
okay?
wrote it down somewhere.
Thank you,
Continue till
Mr.
next
Chair.
month.
Thank you for your time.
Good job. Okay. Now, we got a little bit of time. If I see a representative from the YMCA is here, that's a new application we have. We can give you a few minutes for a brief discussion of what's going on.
Your folder here?
H1. H1.
Oh, thanks.
H1.
Thank you.
Oh, my God.
Good evening. My name's Annette Ellis. I'm a professional engineer with Giuliano Associates here in Wallingford. And we'll just give you a brief introduction on this application. As you mentioned, it's for the Wallingford YMCA. It is on an 8.37 acre parcel located at 8 North Turnpike Road. It's bound by North Turnpike Road to the west, River Road to the south, and the Wilbur-Cross Parkway to the east. There are approximately 1.83 acres of wetlands on the parcel. They run across the southeastern portion of the site. They're depicted in the dark green on the map you have in front of you. This application is for an approximately 17,500 square foot addition. It will be an aquatics addition. The existing building is about 26,900 square feet, and the existing and proposed building are shown in the light tan color. This application proposes to reduce the impervious area by 1,644 square feet, plus or minus, and therefore it also reduces the stormwater runoff. Now, some of this impervious area reduction is within and adjacent to the 50-foot upland review area near River Road. The parking lot entrance from River Road is proposed to be significantly narrower than what currently exists out there. And other than some minor grading, the majority of the wetlands and upland review area disturbance is due to maintenance of and improvements to the storm drainage system. The total wetlands disturbance is about 880 square feet, and the total upland review area disturbance is about 6,366 square feet. Currently, the existing site drainage system connects to a state drainage system that runs through the site from west to east and discharges into the wetlands. This application proposes to separate the site drainage from the state system. The 36-inch outlet of the state system is in need of some maintenance. We propose to add a flared end and a riprap plunge pool to dissipate the outflow from the pipe. This will deter sediment from being deposited into the wetlands and prevent downstream erosion. It will also increase the ease of maintenance in the future. As for the new site drainage system, a 24-inch outlet is proposed in the same general vicinity as the existing state outlet, but the work here is outside the actual wetlands. It too will have a flared end and a plunge pool for the same reasons as previously stated. And the disturbance related to the proposed outlet, as I mentioned, is outside the wetlands, other than just some minor work associated with the grading of that plunge pool. So other than the minor grading and drainage maintenance discussed, all other activity for this application is outside of the wetlands. Since the application is just being accepted tonight, I don't want to go into more detail unless you have any specific questions. Of course, we'll work with Ms. O'Hare to address any comments once we receive them. Our goal would be to hopefully be able to get those comments addressed before next month's meeting. And unless you have any other questions, that's about all I have to say.
You said you've got disturbance in how many square feet of wetlands?
880 square feet.
And what type of disturbance is that?
Some of it is just for grading of one of the plunge pools. The existing state drainage outlet actually outlets into the wetlands, and that outlet hasn't really been maintained. So we want to add a flare down and a plunge pool there, and that would be within the wetlands. That's the main disturbance.
What about the disturbance in the upland review area?
It's for grading associated with those plunge pools and installation of a storm drainage pipe. The last pipe that leads to that outflow goes through the wetlands buffer, but it's been previously disturbed. It actually runs parallel with the state system, and there's also a sanitary main in the same general area.
Commissioners, any comments? Caroline?
Just one. So for the state, I think it's a great idea to separate the state system from the one that you're doing. But do we know why the state system is there? Is it because it runs behind the parkway, or would it be, do you need anything from the state to do that? Is that okay to?
The state is going to review the application.
Okay.
It's on a state road, so they have to anyway, but their system also crosses their property. But basically it takes the drainage from up above the site, the subdivisions up above, and it also takes drainage from the state road.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ellie?
The last time you were in here, we talked about the state, the drainage was plugged off or needed maintenance. You need to go in there and clean them out so the water would flow. Now that was, I don't know, was that 5 years ago?
You're talking about the pipe that actually runs into the.
Excuse me, you got to Name and address.
I'm sorry there. My name is Samuel Sargent. I'm the actual architect on the project. And I don't want to speak to the engineering component of it, but just to recollect the conversation that we did have. Of course, there is the drainage pipe that runs under the Merritt Parkway that is subject to clogging with debris and silt. And ongoing maintenance needs to be done on that until some better solution is made. But I think that that's going to be an ongoing thorn in our side because of what it does. It's a drain that is taking all this flow from up by the Masonic Village and from across River Road and running it through a pipe that goes over Community Lake and the watershed in that area.
Well, before we give you approval to do this application, do you think that you should get together with the state and have some kind of a maintenance program so that there's not going to be a problem 4 or 5 years down the road with this?
I think that would be a really great idea. I think eliminating any blockage in that pipe would make sure it would go a long way to making sure that the site stays reasonably dry and performs as it's being intended by the engineer. I agree with you 100%, Nick.
Yeah, I'm just concerned because it wasn't that long ago, we were down there looking at it, and I believe the state came in, or maybe you had a private contractor come in and opened them all up so that it could flow over to Route 15 freely or somewhat freely.
I think Sean can speak to those activities.
Sean Doherty, Executive Director for the Wallingford Family YMCA. Yes, we've had routine maintenance done with that pipe. The pipe dispenses to a pool, let's say. A lot of silt buildup from the debris that's carried down. And we have it maintained on an annual basis. The game plan, from my understanding, is to separate and create a new system.
We still have the problem with the state. If it clogs up or backs up, you're still going to have a water problem there. That's why I suggested getting together with them and get a maintenance program in place so that their responsibility is to keep it maintained and flowing freely. And then you're going to branch off with your own, which you'll be responsible for. So that's all I'm looking for is not to just go by them and then worry a year from now when it's all backed up again and it's coming up into your parking lot. All right, so that's, just a suggestion.
And from kind of our inheritance of the property, since we actually took rental in 2012, we've maintained basically the state. The state has not maintained that pipe. Well, the YMCA's actually maintained it. So we're planning on continuing that effort.
Okay, Deb?
No.
Mike? No question. Jimmy? All right.
Well, thank you very much for letting us actually make this minor presentation. Thank you.
It's only your charm and personality, Sam, that did it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your kind words, sir.
Okay.
Is it being continued or they're going to return next time?
It's just
right.
received. The application was received tonight,
Oh, okay.
and the chairman let them do a little presentation. But it's just a receipt.
Just to lighten up the agenda, under new applications, A, 25, 1.2, 16 Mactabola Lane. There was an addition requested by administration approval. Aaron and I reviewed it and gave it administration approval. Okay, the other new application is here. I don't think anybody is representing 15 Sterling Drive. All right. You know, it's interesting. We talk about,
That one received
Mary
also?
Mashinsky talked about maintenance of these structures that are built. Number 2 on reports and communication. There's a prime example of Farm Hill Road detention basin wasn't maintained, and the town has no provision to maintain it, even though that particular one is owned by 4 people. And then the town, I think, went in and did clean out the perimeter, but it's still not functioning as it should. All right, Aaron, you had something that you wanted to discuss. Oh, the guy on
Yes,
Jody Drive?
It's on here, yeah, on the back.
Okay,
It's
where-
number 13.
Brookview Avenue.
Yes.
Okay.
That's not an application yet, but I wanted to let you know what's happening behind the scenes. I've been working with them. They've been trying to put together a feasible plan. I mean, a plan that was affordable and feasible at the same time. They finally came through yesterday, and that's why they're on the agenda. I got something yesterday from them, so what's going to happen now is we're going to meet internally, all the departments, you know, the building official is going to weigh in on the block, how you build the block wall, and Rob Beltramitis, head of Public Works, is going to weigh in because he deals with that waterway and everything like that. So, but what I'm leading up to is it might be at the next meeting, we might do a cease and correct order, a friendly cease and correct order to allow them to go forward. I don't know. We're working that out.
Okay. What's that? I don't know. You folks here for a specific reason? "16 Windy Brook."
Okay, that was the minutes
What's that?
the special minutes we approved tonight was about the 16 Winding Brook Lane. They are under here. I wasn't anticipating any action tonight.
What item, do you have it on here, Aaron?
It's on for J5,
Oh,
but
J5.
no action requested or anticipated unless you want to talk about it. I know he was directed he could take down 3 trees if he wants to come and talk about that. Remember the 3 trees?
We have some time. Come on down.
There was the 3 trees, and then there was, for anything else, he needed to come in with an application if he wanted to do stuff
This is our site investigation.
in the upland review area, so.
Did you get the woodlot cleaned out?
We didn't do anything, sir. Robert Sass, 16 Winding Brook Lane. We didn't do anything until,
Pardon me, are you Mr. Sass?
yes, ma'am.
Robert.
I believe my last discussion with Ms. O'Hare was we couldn't do anything until we had a meeting to discuss further after the site investigation was completed.
Well, I don't know if she told you that or not, but it was in the minutes that you were allowed to clean that up while the ground was frozen, so there'd be less damage in rutting. Right, Aaron?
Just for the 3 trees that we discussed, we pointed, you wanted those 3 big trees. One was down, and yeah, you were on site. You were granted to take them, but you were instructed if you want to do anything in that big 4-foot fill area that you need a permit. You'll come in, you'll apply.
Sir, I'm sorry. Where would I see those minutes? Like
They
You all stood there and you talked about these trees hanging.
Correct.
And couldn't I cut them down? Can I clean them up? And I think I was the one that gave you permission to get them cleaned up, that the ground was frozen, you weren't going to have any ruts, and you would be a perfect time to get it straightened out. So now you're saying this is what Aaron told you. So I don't know what to say. I don't have much of an answer.
I think it was about all the other things you want to do, the yard improvements.
Okay, my apologies for that. I believe I had a discussion with Ms. O'Hare, and I remember that conversation that you and I had. From my recollection is that I couldn't continue with anything until I had a conversation with her to continue with, and I didn't want to violate anything, so that was the reason that, I didn't.
Well, then we haven't even revisited this yet.
Right. Do you want to come in for more improvements in your backyard in that what we call the upland review area near the pool?
So we were going to apply for a permit for a retaining wall where that berm was, where.
The berm that holds the pool back, or that up?
It was like that upland area. So we were going to apply for a permit for a retaining wall because originally, prior to us doing our pool, there was a retaining wall that was already there. It was a retaining wall and a couple trees that were there. So we also have a contractor scheduled for March to do the patio for the pool area. We recognize that we do need a pool permit for that. But as far as I know, that's.
Well, we got a meeting the first week in March then. Okay. You'll have a plan submitted by then.
Am I allowed, so I can continue to clean up that woods area, sir? Like with those trees that were,
I think, based on you have the minutes there, correct?
I do. It says nothing about that. Jennifer Sass, 16 Wyndenburg Lane. It just says it briefly gave copies of a document to the commissioners and staff. Ms. O'Hare made her original report with pictures November 1st, issued notice of violation November 21st. Mr. Sass hired a wetland scientist.
Hang on. a
No,
minute,
I think
hang on
that,
a
is
minute.
that December minutes? What minutes are you reading? What's the date on them?
Is that the minutes, the special meeting minutes?
December 4th.
Yeah, she's referring to the December 4th minutes, Mr. Chairman.
All right, this
Yeah.
is the special meeting of December 7th. The owner inquired if it was possible to remove 3 particular matured down and damaged trees located in the remaining wetlands area on the north. Chairman Vitale said that due to the poor quality of this wetland area, altered years ago by agricultural activities and the damaged nature of the trees, they could be removed this winter as a maintenance activity. Removal while the ground was frozen was best time to do the work to cause less damage to the wetlands with ruts, etc. The commission agreed.
Okay.
So that's
Where would we
what was
find that?
discussed
Just so I
on the
have a
site.
copy. Where would we find that?
It just came out tonight, it's our minutes for a special meeting. You can have this copy.
Oh.
The other thing we talked about was making sure no more junk came in the back slope there.
Correct.
We're going to remove all that stuff. Now, as far as the retaining wall, I believe that you need an application for that, so that either we can yay or nay on that.
yes, sir.
So you're going to have to speak with Ms. O'Hare about applying for an application.
Okay.
But the 3 things were the trees. We said, yes, we wanted them when the ground was froze. 2 was get the rest of your landscaping material out of that upper slope area. And the 3rd one was the retaining wall. You talked about putting a pool in or whatever. So retaining wall is something you need a permit for.
Correct.
Can I approach and grab that?
Yeah, you can have that.
No, Aaron, if they've already told you they got a contractor coming in March, they come in with an application in March, you're going to need something like a cease and correct order involved in this, or else they're not going to get a permit for March.
Well, what I thought you were going to say is you could approve it administratively because it's not in the wetlands, it's the upland review area.
See what happens. He's got a tight deadline to deal with. And he's got a small window to make sure he's able to do what he wants to do in March. He's going to have to work close with her.
Okay,
on
I
that.
guess, I remember when we were out there, it was very cold, but I said,
That
well,
got to
let's
do
talk
with
about mitigation plantings. And the commission felt that this area was a low-level wetland, it's fine just to have it as a grass yard, okay? That was my impression. So maybe, well, do you want to lift the violation? I mean, or,
Well, there was things taken down and removed in that low-quality wetland.
yes,
Right?
and
And everything was known. I hear this, I get the feeling is, let me do it and let me ask forgiveness rather than permission. And that's usually what ends up happening. Now you got a low-quality wetland, you say it's better what it is. You got to get the information together and try to speculate. I mean, I'd like to help him out if he's got a guy coming in to do a patio and a wall. But you got time frames if you're going to get an application together. Or how are you going to resolve this violation?
I guess what I'd like to hear from the commission is, I think we can move forward. I don't think you're going to want any, maybe you are, mitigation plantings or pulling up pipes that were put in there or anything.
We've already
You
given
just-
them corrective action. When we were all out there, we talked about it and gave him the corrective actions we wanted to see. And he's just agreed to them. It's a reminder what we said. He agrees. We did say that. The trees he could take down because they're already down in their liability with the children.
Right.
And the landscaping equipment, you said half of it or 3/4 of it was already gone. So
Yep.
that was the other thing. And the 3rd thing was the retaining wall. And I thought we said that if he's going to put a retaining wall in there, he'd have to, he was just an upland review area, it'd have to be approved.
Yes, so I'm fine with that. If you don't want any plantings, that's okay. So we could go ahead and let's apply and let's do that. Maybe even administrative.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for the confusion.
All right. I mean, you go down to the whole list of notifications, it's just, DEP notifications, land use, I mean, this is kind of, Department of Transportation, they're gonna shut the parkway down northbound out over the Quinnipiac River. Railroad, Brookview is the only one that gets to be cease and desist. Kendracky Lane, that just sits there until they get it all finished up. 67 Schoolhouse, I think that's, they gotta wait until the vegetation starts to regrow. I Am the Walrus, that's waiting for that to come back in. 360 Woodhouse Avenue, anything going on with that? Is that the guy with the chicken coops out there?
Yeah, he's waiting. He was actually in the office twice this week or last week. He went and built if you recall, there was a pool and a pool house and drainage that we approved.
He's doing work on it then.
Yeah, but he built his pool house twice as big. So, and then he forgot to get a building permit for the pool house because he said, no, Wetlands gave me a permit. And, you know, a lot of people get confused how many permits they might need. Anyway, so now he's straightening that out. But his point, I said, when are you going to move that chicken coop and that shed? He said, when my pool house and all that is done, then I'll know, then I'll move it because that'll be all done. Move it over
Okay,
there.
number 6 under J6, that thing is as old, not as old as I am, but that's old. What are we doing with number 7? Cease and correct order remains for Carl, little K's, Carl Kessler.
I'd get no movement on that
Yeah,
from
but
the law
what are we
department.
going to do with it? Why don't you get a legal opinion from Janice? What is going to be done with that? Because I don't think you're going to be able to do anything with that.
That's kind of what her opinion is.
So then why are we carrying it? Get a legal opinion to get it off our agenda schedule, okay? Number 8, the last time you mentioned, we got talking about this, Mrs. Clark, she agreed to let her neighbor run a pipe across her property?
No, but then she rescinded that.
What's that?
Then she rescinded that idea. She's always...
She rescinded it?
Yeah, she always does that. Yeah.
Well, this is another one that should have some meat to it, this, because I don't think that she has stopped that. Quigley Road, what are you waiting for Quigley Road, on vegetation to grow back?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. There's nothing else. Entertain a motion to reserve. Oh, I didn't study it because I know they've been in there doing some work there. Yeah. Well, I don't know if they want to come in and get their bond back.
In the spring, they're going to plant some trees. They need to plant trees like they promised. That's what we're waiting for.
Well, they have a direct specification what they're going to do to get the
Yes.
bond relief.
Yes.
Very good. Okay. I have to tell you though, I did like George Logan's. I don't like handouts at the meeting, but that was basically an outline for him to follow, and it was easier for us to follow.
Yeah.
So if there's nothing else, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.